What if the most important guest in the building looked like the one person nobody wanted inside? The words were never spoken aloud, yet they seemed to echo through the polished lobby of the Grand Crescent Hotel in downtown Atlanta on a bright Tuesday morning. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across marble floors while business travelers rolled designer luggage toward private elevators. A soft piano melody drifted from hidden speakers, blending with quiet conversations, and a faint aroma of fresh coffee. Near the entrance stood Darius Coleman, wearing worn brown boots, dark jeans and a simple jacket. He carried no luxury briefcase, no flashy watch, and no visible sign of wealth. He simply checked the time on his phone, then took a seat beside a tall window overlooking Peachtree Street. For several minutes nobody noticed him. Then a receptionist named Ashley Turner glanced up from her desk. Her eyes paused on Darius for a moment before narrowing slightly. She watched him through the reflection of a computer screen, then leaned toward a coworker and whispered something. The coworker looked over his shoulder, smirked, and returned to work. Ashley stood smoothing the front of her navy blazer before walking around the desk. Her heels clicked sharply against the stone floor, drawing brief attention from nearby guests. She stopped several feet from Darius and offered a smile that never reached her eyes. "Sir," she said, keeping her voice polite but firm, "the executive lounge is reserved for registered premium guests." Darius looked up calmly. "I understand," he replied. "I'm meeting someone here this morning." Ashley folded her hands together. "The waiting area upstairs requires special clearance," she said. "You'll need to leave until your contact arrives." Darius glanced toward the elevators, then back at her. "My meeting is scheduled in 20 minutes. I don't mind waiting here." Ashley forced another smile behind her. Two businessmen paused their conversation, pretending not to listen. The pianist near the restaurant entrance continued playing, though even the music suddenly felt thinner around them. "Sir," she said again, this time colder, "hotel policy exists for a reason. We cannot allow unauthorized visitors to remain inside executive spaces." Darius slowly rose from his chair. He stood tall, steady and composed, making no effort to argue. "I don't want any trouble," he said quietly. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Ashley exhaled sharply and glanced toward a uniformed security guard standing near the revolving doors. The guard hesitated, reading the tension before taking a careful step forward. Around him conversations faded, suitcases stopped rolling, coffee cups paused midway to waiting hands. Darius noticed the attention gathering around him, but his expression never changed. Outside, morning traffic moved steadily beneath rows of glass towers reflecting sunlight across the city. Ashley straightened her posture and pointed politely toward the exit. "Sir, if you don't have authorization for this area, I'll need you to leave immediately." Darius looked at the doors, then back at her, and gave a small nod. Slowly for several seconds Ethan Whitmore remained frozen beside the conference table while the executives around him waited for an explanation. The presentation screen continued glowing against the wall, displaying charts nobody was reading anymore. Ethan looked again at the profile photograph on his phone. There was no doubt. The man sitting outside the hotel was Darius Coleman, the independent evaluator selected by the ownership group to conduct the most important service audit in the company's history. The evaluation had been kept secret from almost everyone. Even senior managers had received only limited details. The goal was simple: discover how employees treated people when they believed nobody important was watching. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He remembered the instructions from corporate headquarters months earlier. Do not prepare special treatment. Do not announce the visit. Let the experience unfold naturally. Now it had unfolded in the worst possible way. One executive cleared his throat. "Ethan, is something wrong?" Ethan lowered his phone slowly. "Continue without me," he said. The room fell silent. "Sir?" another executive asked. Ethan was already reaching for the door. "I have an urgent situation at the hotel." He left before anyone could ask another question. Moments later he stepped into a private elevator. The doors closed and the descent began. Floor numbers flashed downward one after another. 32. 31. 30. Ethan rarely felt panic. Years in luxury hospitality had taught him how to remain calm during crises. Power outages. Celebrity complaints. Major conferences. None of those situations had rattled him. This was different. Because this problem could not be fixed with money or public relations. If a guest experienced disrespect, the damage was already done. The elevator opened into the executive parking level. Ethan crossed the garage at a pace that surprised even him. Employees turned their heads as he passed. One assistant attempted to ask a question, but Ethan kept moving. Outside, humid Georgia air wrapped around the city. He entered his vehicle and immediately called the hotel operations director. The phone connected after 2 rings. "Tell me exactly what happened in the lobby this morning." The director hesitated. "I am not sure, sir." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Find out." As the call ended, he pulled onto the street and headed toward the Grand Crescent. Less than 10 minutes away, Darius remained seated on the stone bench. The black sedan that had stopped earlier now sat parked along the curb. Its driver stayed inside waiting quietly. Darius watched pedestrians move through patches of sunlight stretching across the sidewalk. A young mother pushed a stroller. Office workers hurried between buildings carrying coffee cups. Life continued normally around him. His phone vibrated once. A short message appeared on the screen. "Observation continues." Darius read the words and smiled faintly. Then he locked the screen and slipped the phone away. Across the street, reflected in a tower of blue glass, he could see the hotel entrance behind him. Guests entered. Guests exited. Employees moved through revolving doors. Nobody knew the outcome of the day might affect careers across an entire hospitality company. Nobody except Darius. And even he did not yet know what decision he would make when the evaluation finally ended. Back inside the hotel, Ashley felt increasingly confident about the choice she had made. The morning crowd had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Guests checked in. Bell attendants guided travelers toward elevators. The soft piano near the restaurant continued its steady melody. To Ashley, everything appeared normal. In fact, she believed she had prevented a potential problem before it could affect the atmosphere of the lobby. A regional sales manager approached the front desk carrying a leather portfolio. Ashley greeted him with a bright smile and completed his request within seconds. The interaction reinforced her confidence. Professional appearance mattered in luxury hospitality. That was what she had always been taught. What she failed to notice was how quickly assumptions could disguise themselves as judgment. A few feet away, the security guard who had escorted Darius outside remained uneasy. He replayed the encounter in his mind. The man had been calm, respectful, patient. None of the behavior matched someone attempting to create trouble. Twice the guard considered mentioning his concerns to Ashley. Twice he decided against it. Meanwhile, on the sidewalk, Darius remained seated beneath the shadow of the hotel's towering glass facade. The sunlight had shifted slightly across the pavement. He watched reflections move across nearby office windows like waves of silver. Another message appeared on his phone. This one came from a member of the ownership group. "How would you rate the arrival experience so far?" Darius stared at the question for several seconds. Then he locked the screen without answering. Across the city, Ethan Whitmore navigated through midday traffic with growing urgency. Red lights felt longer than usual. Every block seemed to move in slow motion. He had spent years building a reputation for excellence. Yet he understood a difficult truth about leadership. One employee's decision could reveal the real culture hidden beneath polished marketing brochures and 5-star reviews. His phone rang again. This time it was the operations director. Ethan answered immediately. "I reviewed the security footage," the director said. The receptionist believed the guest did not belong in the executive area. Ethan closed his eyes. Briefly. Believed based on what? Silence followed. That silence told him everything. Back at the Grand Crescent, Ashley received a call from an assistant manager requesting a routine report. She completed it efficiently and returned to greeting guests. Then something unusual happened. A black luxury sedan parked along the curb outside. Several employees noticed it immediately. The vehicle remained motionless. The driver stayed inside. Nobody exited. Ashley glanced through the windows and dismissed it. High-end vehicles arrived every day. There was nothing remarkable about that. What she could not see was the discreet company logo displayed on a folder resting beside the driver. The same logo appeared on ownership documents for dozens of luxury properties across the country. Darius checked the time once more. 11:42. His meeting had technically already begun. Not in a conference room. Not around a polished boardroom table. It had begun the moment someone decided who deserved respect and who did not. He stood slowly from the bench and adjusted his jacket. Nearby pedestrians continued walking without noticing him. The city hummed with ordinary life. Yet inside the hotel, the consequences of a single decision were moving closer with every passing minute. The moment Darius stepped away from the bench, his phone vibrated again. He glanced at the screen. Another question from the ownership group waited for him. What is your first impression of employee judgment and guest treatment? He read the message carefully before placing the phone back into his pocket unanswered. Some evaluations could not be measured by numbers alone. Across the street, Ethan Whitmore finally turned into the hotel entrance. His vehicle rolled beneath the covered driveway faster than usual before coming to a controlled stop near the front doors. A valet approached immediately, but Ethan was already stepping out. The expression on his face caused the young valet to hesitate. He had worked at the hotel for 2 years and had never seen the general manager look like this. Ethan crossed the driveway and entered the lobby. The familiar sounds of luxury hospitality surrounded him. Soft music. Quiet conversations. Rolling luggage. Yet his attention moved directly toward the front desk. Ashley looked up and smiled. Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. Ethan did not return the smile. Where is the guest who was removed from the lobby? Ashley blinked. The guest, sir. The gentleman sitting near the executive lounge entrance. Ashley felt uncertainty creep into her voice. He was not authorized to remain there. Ethan stared at her. For a second neither of them spoke. Nearby employees sensed the tension immediately. Who told you he was not authorized? Ethan asked. Ashley shifted her weight. I made the decision based on hotel presentation standards. The answer landed heavily between them. Ethan slowly removed his phone and opened the profile photograph. Then he turned the screen toward her. Ashley's confident expression disappeared. Do you recognize him? He asked quietly. She looked at the image. It was the same man she had escorted outside less than an hour earlier. Yes, she whispered. Ethan lowered the phone. That guest was scheduled to meet ownership representatives today. The color drained from her face. Around them the lobby seemed to grow strangely still. Even employees helping guests found themselves listening without appearing to listen. Ashley swallowed hard. I did not know. Ethan's voice remained controlled, but disappointment lingered beneath every word. That is exactly the problem. Outside, sunlight reflected across the glass entrance doors. Darius had begun walking slowly along the sidewalk, observing the property from different angles. He studied the entrance, the valet operation, the landscaping, and the way employees interacted with visitors. Every detail mattered. Hospitality was never just about buildings. It was about people. Back inside, Ethan turned toward the operations director who had just arrived. Find him. The director nodded immediately and hurried away. Ashley remained frozen behind the desk. Her mind replayed every second of the morning. The assumptions. The certainty. The decision she had never questioned. For the first time she understood something uncomfortable. She had not evaluated the guest. She had evaluated an image she created in her own mind. And somewhere beyond the hotel doors, the man she had judged was still deciding what his report would say. The search spread quietly through the property. Managers checked conference rooms. Concierge staff reviewed guest areas. Valet attendants scanned the driveway. Yet the person everyone was looking for seemed to have disappeared into the flow of the city. Ethan Whitmore stood near the lobby entrance watching the revolving doors turn again and again. Each passing minute felt heavier than the last. Through the glass walls he could see sunlight reflecting from nearby office towers, turning the sidewalks into ribbons of gold. Inside, the hotel remained beautiful. The marble gleamed. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases. Soft music floated through the air. But suddenly none of those details felt important. Across the street, Darius Coleman sat at a small public plaza shaded by oak trees. A fountain whispered quietly nearby as water moved over dark stone. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. Office workers crossed the square carrying lunch bags and coffee cups. The city continued without urgency. Darius watched everything in silence. Hospitality was not measured during perfect moments. It revealed itself during ordinary ones. A young hotel employee finally spotted him from the edge of the plaza and immediately contacted the operations director. Within seconds messages began moving through phones across the property. Ethan received the update and exhaled for what felt like the first time in 20 minutes. Then he started walking. Not running. Not rushing. Simply walking with purpose. The distance was less than a city block, yet every step gave him time to think. He thought about leadership. About assumptions. About how easily people could mistake appearance for value. Behind him, Ashley remained at the front desk. She could no longer focus on routine tasks. Every smiling guest reminded her of the mistakes she had made. Every reflection in the polished marble seemed to ask the same question. What had she actually seen when she looked at Darius? The answer made her uncomfortable. She had not seen a person. She had seen a stereotype built from incomplete information. Outside, a breeze moved through the plaza. Leaves rustled softly above the fountain. Darius noticed Ethan approaching before the manager was halfway across the square. Their eyes met briefly. Ethan slowed as he reached the bench. For a moment neither man spoke. The sounds of the city filled the silence between them. A distant horn. Flowing water. Footsteps on concrete. Finally Ethan nodded respectfully. Mr. Coleman. Darius looked up calmly. Good afternoon. Ethan took a breath. I owe you an apology. The words carried no corporate polish. No prepared script. Just honesty. Darius studied him carefully. He had spent years evaluating organizations. He knew the difference between performance and sincerity. Ethan remained standing beside the bench, unwilling to pretend the situation had not happened. The experience you had this morning does not reflect the values we claim to represent, he said quietly. Darius glanced toward the hotel across the street. Sunlight flashed across its glass exterior. Sometimes, he replied, the truest reflection of an organization is not what it claims. It is what happens when nobody thinks they are being evaluated. Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment. The statement landed with undeniable weight. Neither man spoke again immediately. The fountain continued its steady rhythm while the afternoon light shifted across the plaza, and in that quiet pause the Real evaluation moved into its most important stage. The afternoon sun reflected across the fountain as Darius rose from the bench. Ethan stepped aside and motioned toward the hotel across the street. Neither man spoke immediately. Together they crossed the intersection while traffic rolled steadily through downtown Atlanta. The city seemed unaware that a simple walk was about to change the course of several careers. As they approached the entrance, employees near the driveway began noticing them. A valet straightened. A concierge paused mid-conversation. Through the glass doors, word traveled faster than footsteps. By the time Darius entered the lobby, dozens of eyes had quietly shifted in his direction. The piano music still played. But the atmosphere felt entirely different. Ashley stood behind the front desk, her hands clasped tightly together. The confidence she had carried earlier was gone. She watched as Ethan escorted Darius through the center of the lobby instead of around it. Nobody needed an announcement. The scene itself said enough. Yet Ethan stopped near the reception desk and turned toward the gathered staff. His voice remained calm, but every employee could hear it clearly. "I would like everyone to meet Mr. Darius Coleman." A ripple of silence spread across the marble floor. Several managers exchanged uneasy glances. Ashley felt her stomach sink. Ethan continued. "Mr. Coleman was invited here today by the ownership group." More silence. The words landed like stones in still water. One employee near the concierge desk quietly lowered his eyes. Another shifted uncomfortably beside a luggage cart. Darius stood calmly, showing no sign of satisfaction. No anger. No triumph. Only quiet observation. Ethan looked toward Ashley. "The evaluation began before any of us realized it had." Ashley swallowed hard. For a moment she considered speaking, then stopped. Nothing she could say would change what had already happened. Darius noticed the discomfort spreading through the lobby. He had seen similar moments before in different companies across the country. The revelation was never the most important part. What mattered was what happened afterward. Ethan gestured toward a nearby seating area reserved for executive meetings. "Mr. Coleman, the ownership representatives are waiting upstairs whenever you are ready." Darius glanced around the room one last time. His eyes moved across the front desk, the concierge station, the entrance, the employees standing silently beneath crystal chandeliers. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of heading toward the elevators immediately, he turned toward Ethan. "Before we go upstairs," he said, "I have one question." The lobby became completely still. Even guests passing through slowed their pace. Ethan nodded. "Of course." Darius looked around the room again. "How many people have walked through these doors over the years and been judged before?" They were welcomed. No one answered. The question was not directed at one person. It was directed at everyone. The silence that followed felt heavier than any speech. Ashley lowered her gaze toward the polished marble floor. For the first time that day, she understood the true purpose of the evaluation. It had never been about luxury. It had never been about appearances. It had always been about dignity. The question remained suspended in the air long after Darius finished speaking. The lobby that had seemed so lively only minutes earlier now felt unusually still. Conversations faded. The soft piano melody drifting from the restaurant seemed distant. Even the steady movement of guests entering through the revolving doors slowed as people sensed the importance of the moment unfolding before them. Darius stood calmly in the center of the polished marble floor. Warm afternoon sunlight streamed through the towering glass windows behind him, casting long reflections across the lobby. He was not standing there as a wealthy evaluator. He was not standing there as a VIP guest. In that moment he represented every person who had ever been judged before being known. Ethan Whitmore remained beside him, silent and thoughtful. The ownership representative who had arrived from corporate headquarters watched carefully from nearby. He had attended hundreds of meetings during his career. He had reviewed reports, financial statements, and operational audits worth millions of dollars. Yet somehow this moment felt more significant than any spreadsheet he had ever studied. Ashley stood behind the front desk with her hands folded tightly together. She could feel every pair of eyes in the lobby. Earlier that morning she had been completely certain she was protecting the standards of the hotel. Now she understood how dangerous certainty could become when it was built on assumptions. Slowly she stepped away from the reception desk. Her heels clicked softly against the marble as she walked toward Darius. The sound echoed through the quiet lobby. Nobody spoke. Nobody interrupted. Ashley stopped a few feet in front of him. For several seconds she searched for the right words. None of the phrases she had rehearsed in her mind seemed adequate anymore. Finally she took a slow breath. "Mr. Coleman," she said quietly, "I was wrong." The words were simple. Honest. Uncomfortable. Exactly what they needed to be. Darius listened without expression. Ashley continued. "When you arrived this morning, I decided who you were before I knew anything about you. I looked at your clothes. I looked at your appearance. I made assumptions that were not fair." Her voice trembled slightly. "I thought I was protecting the image of the hotel. Looking back, I was protecting my own assumptions." The ownership representative lowered his eyes briefly. Ethan remained motionless. Ashley swallowed hard before continuing. "You treated everyone with respect today, including me. I did not give you that same respect in return. I am truly sorry." Silence followed. Not an awkward silence. A meaningful one. The kind that appears when people are listening with their hearts instead of simply waiting for their turn to speak. Darius looked around the lobby. He saw employees standing near the concierge desk. He saw housekeepers passing through a side hallway. He saw bell attendants beside the entrance. Every one of them was watching. Every one of them would remember what happened next. Finally Darius nodded. "Thank you for saying that." Relief appeared briefly across Ashley's face, but she remained quiet. Darius glanced toward the entrance where guests continued arriving throughout the afternoon. "The hospitality business is not really about buildings," he said. "It is not about chandeliers. It is not about marble floors. It is not even about luxury." His voice remained calm. Measured. "It is about how people feel when they walk through the door." Nobody moved. "A person should not have to prove they deserve basic respect," he continued. "Respect should come first." The words settled across the room. Ethan felt them deeply. So did Ashley. So did the employees standing throughout the lobby. Darius turned toward her again. "People make mistakes. Every person in this room has made them. The question is whether we learn from them." Ashley nodded slowly. "I will." Darius believed her. Not because of the apology itself, but because he could see genuine reflection behind her words. Ethan finally stepped forward. "Mr. Coleman, the ownership team is ready whenever you are." Darius smiled faintly. "I think they can wait one more minute." Several people in the lobby exchanged small smiles. The tension that had gripped the building all day began to ease. Not because anyone had escaped accountability. The opposite was true. The tension eased because accountability had finally arrived. The ownership representative stepped closer. "Mr. Coleman," he said respectfully, "I believe today may become one of the most valuable evaluations our company has ever received." Darius looked around the lobby one last time. Sunlight reflected from the marble floor. Guests continued checking in. Employees returned to their responsibilities. Yet something felt different now. Warmer. More human. "Then perhaps it was worth the trip," he replied. With that, he turned toward the elevators beside Ethan. The ownership representative followed. Behind them, Ashley remained standing quietly near the front desk. She watched the elevator doors close and understood that the most important lesson she learned that year would never come from a training manual. It came from a man she had underestimated and a moment she would never forget. 3 months passed, yet the events of that afternoon continued to echo throughout the Grand Crescent Hotel in ways nobody could have predicted. Autumn had arrived in Atlanta. The air outside carried a cooler edge, and golden leaves drifted along downtown sidewalks beneath clear blue skies. The city moved with its usual rhythm. Morning commuters hurried toward office towers. Restaurants filled with lunch crowds. Traffic flowed beneath reflections of glass skyscrapers. From the outside, the hotel appeared exactly as it always had. Elegant. Impressive. Successful. But inside, something had changed. The change could not be measured in occupancy rates or financial reports. It could not be captured in marketing campaigns or guest surveys alone. It lived quietly in hundreds of small interactions that occurred every day. Guests still entered through the revolving doors beneath crystal chandeliers. Bell attendants still greeted travelers with welcoming smiles. The scent of fresh coffee still drifted through the lobby each morning. Yet employees approached their work differently now. New training programs have been introduced across the hotel group after Darius submitted his final evaluation. Managers attended workshops focused on dignity, respect, and unconscious assumptions. Team meetings began including conversations about how every guest should be treated before any judgment was formed. At first some employees viewed the changes as another corporate initiative. Over time they realized something deeper was happening. The culture itself was evolving. Ashley Turner understood that better than anyone. She still worked behind the same reception desk where everything had begun. The marble floor beneath her feet remained unchanged. The polished counter looked exactly the same. Yet every morning when she arrived at work, she remembered the lesson she learned that day. One rainy Thursday morning an elderly couple entered the lobby carrying worn suitcases. Their clothes were simple. Their appearance unremarkable. Months earlier Ashley might have made assumptions without realizing it. This time she stepped forward immediately with a warm smile and greeted them exactly as she would greet a celebrity or executive. The couple later wrote a letter praising the kindness they experienced during their stay. Similar stories began appearing again and again. Small moments. Meaningful moments. Human moments. Ethan Whitmore noticed the difference throughout the property. He often walked through the lobby without announcing himself, observing interactions between staff and guests. What he saw encouraged him. Employees listened more carefully. They welcomed people more sincerely. They focused less on appearances and more on individuals. During leadership meetings Ethan repeated a lesson he had learned himself. Luxury begins with respect, he would say. Everything else comes afterward. The phrase gradually spread throughout the organization. Several months after the evaluation, the ownership group launched a company-wide initiative inspired by Darius's report. Properties across the country adopted similar training standards. The report itself became required reading for senior managers. Many expected it to be harsh. It was not. Darius had not written pages filled with criticism. Instead he described a simple truth. Systems improve when people are willing to learn. The ownership representative who had witnessed the events firsthand often referenced that report during executive meetings. He described it as one of the most valuable evaluations the company had ever received. Not because it exposed weakness, but because it revealed an opportunity for growth. Late one afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the hotel's towering windows, Ashley walked toward the employee training center located near the administrative offices. A framed photograph hung on the wall outside the entrance. She had passed it dozens of times before, yet she still paused whenever she saw it. The photograph showed Darius standing among hospitality professionals at a national conference. Beneath the image appeared a quote taken directly from his final report. Every guest deserves respect before they earn it because dignity is not something people prove. It is something they already possess. Ashley stood quietly reading the words once again. Nearby employees passed through the hallway. Some nodded respectfully toward the photograph. Others slowed briefly to read the quote before continuing on their way. No formal ceremony had accompanied its installation. None was necessary. The message spoke for itself. As evening approached, warm amber light filled the lobby. Guests checked in. Conversations drifted through the air. Soft piano music floated from the restaurant. Ethan crossed the marble floor on his way to another meeting and glanced toward the entrance where everything had begun months earlier. Ashley looked up from the reception desk at the same moment. Their eyes met briefly. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. Outside, the city continued moving beneath the fading sunset. Inside, the hotel felt peaceful. Not because mistakes never happened. Not because everyone had become perfect. It felt peaceful because people had chosen to learn instead of defend, to grow instead of deny, to listen instead of assume. The last rays of sunlight reflected across the marble floor before slowly disappearing into evening. The chandeliers glowed softly overhead. Guests continued arriving. Employees continued welcoming them. And somewhere within that quiet rhythm remained the lasting legacy of one ordinary-looking visitor who reminded everyone that kindness was not weakness, dignity was not earned, and true respect begins long before anyone discovers who a person really is.